Hey guys, this is Doug Zanes. Most of you probably have no idea who I am because I don't have much of a social media presence at this point. But you're getting this because you're on our Zanes Law Facebook page or one of our Facebook pages for either Tucson or Phoenix. Anybody who is connected with us knows that Zanes Law is a personal injury law firm with offices both in Tucson and Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm Doug Zanes, so I own it. So I'm the guy in charge. But I wanted to actually do a Facebook Live discussion about Prop 205. And Prop 205 is the marijuana initiative that's going to be on the ballot tomorrow, because tomorrow's voting day. So, I think Tuesday is the voting day. I'm guessing if you're like me, you're tired of all the election stuff. You're tired of the presidential election. You're tired of the commercials. You're tired of the fighting and nastiness. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not going to get into who I'm voting for. But I am happy. I've had a good Monday. I hope all of you have. I got up bright and early this morning at 5:30. Woke up next to my beautiful wife, Claudia, who I think a lot of you are probably connected with. She's got a much bigger Facebook presence than I do. I had a good morning of work, and since I'm trying to get healthy, then I went to the gym and worked out with my trainer, and now I'm back at the office and plugging away. And so, but I wanted to make sure we got this done before I left today, and because really what I want to do is I want to try to clear up a bunch of the misinformation that's out there about the marijuana initiative that's going to be on the ballot. Not because I'm pro that initiative or against that initiative. That's not what this conversation's about. And I'm not going to try to tell you ought to vote one way or another. That's up to you. There's not, quite frankly, a right or wrong. I mean, we all have a right to our own opinions and a right to vote the way that we think is the appropriate way to vote. But I think it's important that just everybody have all the information. And it occurred to me over the weekend as I was watching TV, I saw a couple of TV commercials that are running. They're really anti-Prop 205. They're basically telling you why you should not vote for Prop 205, the marijuana initiative. And I think one had, I guess what I recall is a school teacher in Denver talking about how essentially the schools in Denver were duped when the marijuana initiative passed in Denver, because the schools were told they would get a bunch of tax dollars that would benefit the schools, and the Denver schools never got it. And so it's all a sham, and you shouldn't vote for the proposition here in Arizona. And then I think there was, I believe, a police chief who did a commercial, who was a police chief from Colorado, who essentially said, once the proposition passed, or now that the proposition has passed, teen marijuana use has essentially skyrocketed. And the problem with those two commercials is, quite honestly, factually, they're incorrect. That's the misinformation I'm talking about. It's interesting how, I haven't seen a whole lot out on the other side. With I think most initiatives, the group who is against it tends to be better funded and tends to be more vocal. But quite honestly, that information wasn't correct. So I want to talk to that a little bit because I think it's an important topic. As most of you probably know, Arizona has had medical marijuana usage for a number of years now. That passed a few years back. That's in place. I'm sure I know people who have a medical marijuana card. I just don't know that they have it. If you understand what I'm saying. What I mean is, if I take all the people I know, all the friends that I have, all the acquaintances that I have, I would bet there are people within that group who, for whatever medical reasons, have a medical marijuana card. I just don't know it because they've never shared it with me. They seem to be living good lives, doing legal things and not being bad people, even though they have access to marijuana for whatever their medical condition is. Because the reality of it is factually, marijuana is similar to alcohol. The similarities between the two of them are both can get you intoxicated, both cause impairment, and both, from a scientific standpoint, are habit form. I mean, they're pretty much equal. They're on the same playing field when it comes to a drug. Alcohol and marijuana are even. The differences between alcohol and marijuana is, I think, from what I've read, most medical professionals would agree that only alcohol is addictive. The research seems to show that marijuana is actually not addictive, but alcohol is. Another big difference, and this is really one of the main arguments against this initiative, is that when you look at alcohol, alcohol really comes in one form, right? It's a drink, right? There are different types of alcohol. There's hard liquor, there's beer, there's wine. There are a bunch of different types, but it's all in a drink form. Marijuana, actually, if this initiative were to pass, will come in different forms. You'll have actually marijuana that you can smoke. There will be marijuana that can be vaped. There will be marijuana that can be drank in some sort of liquid form. And there will be marijuana that can be eaten. And in particular, a lot of the information out there revolves around marijuana that can be eaten, because a lot of the edibles, as they're known as, are made in candy format, whether it's suckers, whether it's candy that looks like a Snickers bar or a Recess, peanut butter cup packaging. It actually looks like candy. Now, one of the things that I think has been changed in Colorado since the law went into effect is in response to that and the concerns that actually, for example, a 10-year-old will pick up a marijuana edible that looks like a sucker that happens to be, that their parents brought home, or that looks like a candy that they would normally get at, let's say, the grocery store, is the packaging requirements have actually been changed in Colorado. So it's really clear that this is not candy. At least that's from an adult's perspective. And really when you talk about kids getting a hold of it, seems to me, and again, this is just my opinion, it certainly doesn't have to be yours, but that comes down to responsibility. If an adult brings this home and there are kids in the house, it's really the adult's responsibility to make sure it's packed, it's not somewhere where the kids can get it, where it's available, to be stumbled upon by their kids. Again, is it a perfect world? No. Can I certainly foresee some parent going down to the store where you buy it, bringing it home, and a 10-year-old getting a hold of it? Sure. But again, what you'll have to decide is the fact that certainly those things can and probably will happen. Is that enough of a reason to not vote for it? And the answer may be yes. But those are really the differences between alcohol and marijuana. So if you look at it from a practical standpoint, they're pretty similar. The only difference is the form that marijuana comes in and the fact that that alcohol is addictive. Now, and I've got a couple notes here because I just wanted to stay on some sort of track, but the facts are, even though the TV commercials have said differently, that teen marijuana consumption in Colorado is actually the same as the national average. And it really, in everything I've read anyways, the data seems to show that it hasn't increased because the law went into effect in Colorado. Now you can talk about DUIs and the concern that somebody will get marijuana in their system, smoke a joint, have an edible, and go drive and get a DUI. That's certainly a possibility, just like it is with alcohol. Happens every day with alcohol. And my guess is, even now when marijuana is illegal, it happens every day in Arizona as well. I know that quite honestly for a fact from all the years where I did criminal defense work and handled DUIs. I mean, Arizona actually has a DUI law that deals with DUI drug cases, whether it's having marijuana in your system, cocaine, other opiates, people prescription drugs. It actually is illegal in Arizona to drive with drugs in your system that are either illegal drugs or prescription drugs that you have a prescription for, but you've used the drug inappropriately. So all those things actually exist now. Will they increase if marijuana is made legal? I don't know, possibly. And that certainly is something that you should weigh when trying to decide if you're going to vote for or against this particular measure. But you do need to understand that actually DUI drug laws are in effect now, because the way, at least from my perspective, this has all been presented in a way where the argument really seems to be, hey, if we make marijuana legal, now we're going to have people who are driving under the influence of marijuana, and we don't know how to deal with that, which isn't actually accurate, because the laws are actually in effect now. In fact, right now, in the same election, there are 6 different states. Arizona is one of 6 states trying to pass or trying to make recreational use of marijuana legal. In response to 6 states trying to do this now, in addition to the states where it's already legal, and in addition to marijuana, medical marijuana cards existing in a number of states, there are actually a couple different tech companies currently trying to develop different technology in order to measure the amount of marijuana in somebody's system by a police officer, for example, on the side of a road, just like they would if you took a breath test. One deals with the saliva test, the other actually deals with a breath test. But so those things will come online pretty quickly, I guess. I really think, regardless of whether or not this measure passes, because it's already something police departments deal with. So this really isn't an issue of simply, public health. If we pass this, more people are going to use marijuana, and again, I've heard the argument that marijuana is a gateway drug and it leads to other drug use, which again may be true. I'm not going to argue that it is or isn't. I don't have that information. But there's also an issue of criminal justice reform. The reality of it is billions of dollars are spent every year currently incarcerating people for marijuana offenses that are minor offenses that kind of stack up. And that will all change if marijuana becomes legal as well. It's important that you, I think, evaluate that piece or look into that piece when trying to decide whether or not you want to vote for or against this. In addition, there's the school funding piece that was mentioned in the commercial that we talked about a little while ago. What's interesting, or what they don't tell you in the commercial, and this is crazy to me, that somebody would make this commercial and not present it fairly, is the reason the Denver schools didn't receive any tax monies based off the taxes raised from marijuana being legal is because the schools opted out of receiving that money. In Colorado, actually, in the last year, the sales of marijuana generated an additional, from what I understand, $40 million in funding available to public schools that lots of other schools in Colorado received and took advantage of. But the marijuana, or the Denver schools actually opted out of that. So that was their choice. But it was presented in the commercial in a way that makes it sound like they were lied to, that the money wasn't raised, that it wasn't available to the schools, which from what I've read it actually was. They just opted out of it because, based off of morality arguments, from what I can gather. And so that's an important piece that's sort of mischaracterized. So really, one of the things I'd like you to think about, just when trying to decide whether or not you're going to vote for the initiative or against, is this. It seems to me that whether or not the use of marijuana is made legal is more an issue of responsibility, responsible regulation, and responsible enforcement. Now, it's perfectly okay, I think, to conclude that responsible regulation is simply to keep it illegal and not change anything. That's certainly one conclusion you can draw, but I think it is. It's an issue of responsible regulation and responsible enforcement. And so, kind of mull through that, a little bit tonight before you go to the polls tomorrow. That's just what I wanted to put out there. I don't know if it's helpful or not. If I wasted 10 minutes of your time, I'm sorry. If it's helpful, fantastic. But that's about it. I want you guys to have a great Monday. Have a great day voting tomorrow, and have a great week.